Welcome, everybody. This is Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, a series brought to you by Westwards Consulting, the Kenosha County Substance Use Disorder Coalition, and by a grant from the state of Wisconsin's Dose of Reality Real Talks, reminding you that opioids are powerful drugs and that one pill can kill. I'm Mike McGowan. The Bridge House Grace House in New Orleans, Louisiana has a wonderful mission. It is simply rebuilding lives for men and women with dignity, honesty, and respect, to help those who have literally lost everything. We're going to talk about how they go about that with our guest today, Kevin Gardere. Kevin has been with Bridge House Grace House since 2002 and presently is the CEO. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Well, there's the New Orleans accent.
Yep, there it is.
Did you grow up there?
Sure did. Yeah. So sometimes we get confused with a Boston, maybe New York accent. We hear that a lot, but I'm New Orleans born and bred.
Yeah, I don't get, maybe Boston. I don't get New York though.
Right.
Well, Kevin, I'll get to the programs at Bridge House, Grace House in a minute. But first, you didn't start out there as a CEO.
No, I didn't start out wanting to grow up and be a CEO of a nonprofit, especially we're a substance abuse facility for the homeless, indigent, underinsured, unemployed. Basically started for those people living on the streets. But no, I had a good life. I'm the youngest of five kids and was what we say spoiled rotten mostly by my siblings. But just recently we lost my father and it brought us all together. We were talking about stories and I was like, I was drunk at this event. And they're like, wait, no, you were 11.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I was drunk. And then at 14, it was like, I remember it was like my parents' 25th anniversary, just, totally intoxicated there. And so I grew up in a good family. I had everything I needed or a lot of what I wanted. And things were there for me, but I always seemed like I had an addictive personality. And then, went through high school, graduated in honors, was getting ready to go up to LSU and had a family issue. And like my parents separated for a period of time. And I was the only one in the house. So I had some money from graduation, was just going out every night and never really, dabbled into the drugs that much. I did ecstasy over high school, smoke weed, but it was mostly just alcohol. And then driving home from uptown New Orleans to the suburbs where I lived on July 28th, 1988, I was totally intoxicated. Don't remember most of that day. And I went through a telephone pole and into someone's house. I was about 4 blocks from home and they had to shock me. They thought like a transformer blew at this house, but it was actually my car, thank God I was alone because nobody else was hurt, nobody in the house, but lost my spleen, my left kidney, was in the hospital for 2 months and had acid burn all on my right leg. My left leg had a compound fracture of my femur. It was a mess. And, there were moments where they didn't know if I would make it or like when they took out the kidney. After a couple of weeks, they were trying to save it at first. I started internally bleeding. It was tough 2 months for me. And instead of that being kind of an eye-opening experience and thinking like, maybe I have this issue, I was quickly introduced to opiates and I was getting Demerol IV push, which is like shooting up going straight to your veins every 3 hours. And then they would do it every 4, then they started doing it muscular. But I think when our filing was released from the hospital, I was excited about just being home. And I was still taking the pills, and then my leg was a mess. It was like 3 inches shorter than my right leg. And so I had numerous surgeries in the next year or two. And of course, for the first one back was just like a scope, and they gave me some more Percodan. I was like, this really makes me feel pretty good. And I don't really have any stressors. And I have a lot I have to do physical therapy wise, but with this, I can get through it. I can get through a few things. It slowed me down. It was a beta euphoria. And throughout the next 13 years, I stayed addicted and had numerous surgeries, wanted to have surgeries at one point just to
Mm.
be able to get more meds, and started doctor shopping. And not long after, the following year after the accident, I went to LSU and I had this huge device on my leg that was used to lengthen my leg. Like literally, I had pins going through and through and around. It's called the Elizaroff. I had 14 pins going through my femur and the lower leg. And you were basically, they cut my bone in half, the outer bone. You pull apart your bone a millimeter in dead.
Oh,
And that was the first doctor. It was Dr. Michelle Zembo. She was pretty young at the time. She was the only doctor in the state that was doing it. So I had to go to a children's hospital, even though I was 19, to have this put on. But she knew I had an issue. I was like, what kind of pain meds do I get? She was the first one to realize it anyway. You know, I finished college, met a beautiful woman. I was working for the recreation department and coaching baseball and basketball, and life looked good on the outside, but I was very good at hiding it. It got to a point where I wanted to go in everybody's house, and my reasoning was to see if they had pain meds in their medicine cabinet, was to find out,
mm.
you know, and but they kept them in the bathroom, the kitchen. Some people do the bedroom thing, but most bathroom and kitchen. So that was my goal whenever I entered someone's house for years. And even I can remember, like, when we were looking for houses to buy, like asking to use the bathroom, like stealing meds from a house. Then I wanted to go more open houses just to see if the bathroom had pain meds there. And they buying some off the street. But with my injuries, it was pretty easy to get.
Sure.
But, you know, it was, at first it was like, well, I need this, or I'm in pain. And I was. But then there were times where I'm like, I'm not in pain, but I want it. I got married in 96, was working as a high school basketball coach and athletic director. And finally, it just kind of hit the fan. Like my wife knew I had an issue. I told her I'd stop drinking. I never really did. I had an alcohol-induced seizure when my wife was 8 months pregnant with my daughter Grace. And so that was like 1999. And then after Grace was born, we went on a trip to Gulf Shores, or a beach in Alabama, Florida line. And I went out, got shit faced again, and she left. And her leaving may have saved my life, but I didn't stop there. And I started
Mhm.
talking to this guy, Buzzy, because I knew his nephew and I knew his wife. His nephew I grew up with, his wife was a crazy LSU fan, like most of my family. And we used to tailgate together. But when things got bad, you're like, over those periods, I had a couple of overdoses, I think 3. It was mostly pills then, and Oxycontin really hadn't hit the scene then. But after my wife left, I had some money, still had a job, and I'm like, y'all are crazy. I don't have a problem. I'm the youngest athletic director in the state of Louisiana. Look at this guy. He's the addict, that guy, just all the
Mhm.
denial patterns. I was the king of them. And then I started talking to Buzzy after my wife left, and I knew he had something I wanted. And he was the executive director of Bridge House at that time and had been running Bridge House forever. He was never at the tailgate, or at the parties. He was always helping people or something. And he was an amazing man, had a great story, like had it all, and he gave it away to get into the substance abuse treatment field, and just a spiritual giant. But it took 2 years after we started talking before I realized how bad my issue was, and didn't really take his suggestions of going to AA meetings.
Mhm.
Going to AA meetings with no alcohol, but tons of pills in me. And the same around like my family. I just wouldn't drink in front of people, but was always pilled up. And eventually I lost my job and I had to move back in with my parents. The pills ran out, so I was just turning to alcohol. And then it was like, I'm either going to swallow a bullet or get honest with somebody. Thank God I did. And my breathing was probably about 50 respirations a minute. I was 6'1", 121 pounds. My dad brought me to meet Buzzy to talk to him, and then gave me the riot act the whole way there. I can't believe you're doing this to me and your mom, and blah, blah, blah. And Buzzy's like, you need to go to detox. So it was March 30th of 2001. The next day was my golden birthday. I was turning 31, March 31st, 2001. And I spent that golden birthday in Charity Hospital in the world's detox unit. And not where you want to be when you grow up. But I remember before my dad gave me the riot act, and Buzzy stayed with me until they had a bed available at the hospital to detox. And we stayed in his office, and I met a few guys who were setting up for a meeting. And I had no clue what Bridge House was. I thought it was just a homeless facility that helped people get on their feet and get a job, maybe. But I made a commitment that I was going to come back there after detox. But I could remember going into detox, the two big wooden door, and the lady opened the door, and my dad grabbed me, and he's like, you don't have to do this. It was a 4-hour process from me bringing him and all the rider. And he's like, wait, you don't have to do this. We can. And I'm like, no, I need to do it. And thank God I had that moment of clarity here. They made a commitment to come back to Bridge House. And it was a little wild at first. I was
Yeah, I
scared.
bet.
I was scared to death, and walking up the ramp, I can remember some guy hugging me and says, I love you, and you don't have to live that way anymore. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is wrong with him? And then my first roommate had been in Angola prison, the most famous prison in the for 25 years. And I'm like, man, you only get in Angola for 25 years for a couple of things. And then I got to know him, and he had killed his father because his stepfather, because he was raping his stepbrother and sister. And I'm like, man, I could have done that. If that would have happened to me, wouldn't be me.
Mm.
Especially if, I was built up or I had a little juice in my system. So it quickly let me realize that, like, I'm not different than any of these guys here at first. And then, I entered, and it was a year-long treatment program back then.
Wow.
Yeah. The promises of 12 steps started coming true for me really quickly. I was like, after about a month, I started sleeping decently, and I gained a little bit of hope. And just the guys in the house was the biggest thing. And then, of course, we had a counselor, and then we had people come in and talk. And then they have work therapy, like where you're assigned a job within the organization. Could be at one of our thrift stores. Like we have a car lot, mechanic shop. And things were great. But when I moved to like the final phase, which was kind of like independent living phase, where you were living in an apartment, kind of like the Oxford House model, but you were still part of our program. We still had group every night and so forth. I was like, I don't think I'm as sick as these guys. These guys, they've been through 4 treatments. They smoked crack. And started not attending the meetings, forging the slips, and I fell on my face and got a shit face on my mother's 60th surprise birthday party. There was no alcohol there. It was at a little reception hall. There was no alcohol there because of me. They didn't want to tempt me, I guess you would say. And I showed up shit faced.
Mm.
And it was 100 people there, and we were a huge family. And at that moment, thank God I had another moment of clarity. I got into like a physical fight with my father and his brother, my uncle, who was extremely close to. He's like, where do you want to go? I'm like, where do I want to go? Like, he's not even going to take me in. And I'm like, I want to go back to Bridge House. And thank God they took me in. I started the program all over. And that's how I was introduced to Bridge House. And I can remember Buzz was coming in, like, look, man. And it was one of the first times he yelled at me after a relapse. And he was like, Bridge House isn't going to say you're bad, but we'll give you tools. But the 12 steps will.
Hmm.
That's when I immerse myself into an area, and mostly a area, actually. I found it.
I thought it was interesting. I think I got this right, that you took over your CEO position from somebody who was one of your first counselors there, and she was also a resident.
He was. So Bridge House at one point had women in our program. So right now we're Bridge House, Grace House.
Yes.
Bridge House is the men's facility. Grace House is the women. We merged after Hurricane Katrina, because Grace House really didn't have a nest egg to reopen, and we had been saving money to build our own facility, and it just made sense. But going back to your question, Elsa Peterson was my first counselor, and she had come through in the 90s when Bridge House, we had a day program, because we had like 130 beds, and we were accepting women, but like if you had a place to stay, you could stay there and then show up at Bridge House at 7 a.m. and stay there until 10 p.m., go home, and then come back. And she was part of that program. And we did have some women beds. Like we like put the women upstairs and men downstairs, but it was too much. We were creating too many issues.
Mm-hmm.
But Elsa went through that program. She went and got her counseling credentials and went and got her MBA. She then took over when Buzzy passed away in 2011.
On the first page of your website, it says that for over 65 years, because you guys been around a long time, it's been your mission to provide substance use disorder treatment services to those who have lost everything. And I would think that would also include insurance.
Yeah. So the Medicaid expansion didn't really come to Louisiana until 2016. The previous governors before that rejected the Obamacare, basically. And so we were working for years with not accepting any type of private insurance and getting minimal support from the government. But it was started in 57, a group of guys, like 4 or 5 guys that wanted to help those people living on the street. They opened a facility with like 5 beds above a bar in a neighborhood that was considered Skid Row. So they really met the population where they were. And then a year or 2 after that, they moved to the Camp Street location, which people still believe, we own that. We never did own it. We rented it for 40 years, but it increased our capacity significantly. And it was kind of like a 12-step clubhouse at the time. And it kind of stayed that way up until 1984 is when Buzzy Gagne took over and also really made this place what it is today. I mean, the clinical team we have is better than it's ever been. We're struggling financially, but our program, we have shortened our program over the years. We ask people to make a commitment to stay with us for 6 months. Some people may be able to complete in as quick as 4, and then others might have to stay here. We have a couple of ladies like Grace House that have been here 10 months or so. So we try to individualize it, but we're having more completions the last year, more in 24 than we had in 23, which 23 broke a record, 730 people a year. And we had 120 completions in 2024. We're on pace to be about 140 this year. So, I mean, it takes a lot to stay here. It's you 6 months, you're sleeping here. But the way the program is set up, it's like you gradually get a little bit more freedom as you progress.
I'll get to the funny in a minute, which is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you. But dignity, restoring somebody's dignity when they've lost everything, includes getting back on your feet financially. So it includes work, right?
Yeah. So vocational rehabilitation is a huge part of our program. I mean, there's not many places anymore that'll treat someone for free for after detox and then like that 28-day stretch. So maybe 45, like we get referrals from all over the state, but we really treat the whole person. After you're here for a month or so, that first month, I guess, would be similar to most 28-day programs, lots of group meetings, readings, writings, homework assignments, study off, 12-step meetings, one-on-ones. After that, you're assigned a job within our organization, and that's really the meat and potatoes of our program. The people that walk through our doors, the majority have been through 3 treatment
Yeah.
episodes before. They know what to do. They just haven't done it yet. I say it's kind of like reality therapy. It's it's difficult to work in our kitchen. We have 84 guys here,
Wow.
you know, serving dinner tonight. At least 16 of them are going to complain about what you're serving them. It's stressful. And working in our thrift store and our warehouse, it's like it's pretty impressive when you see our thrift store, our warehouse, and our car lot. They're asked to perform. And so you're going through these jobs that you're given and you're experiencing the daily stresses of a work environment, but still being asked to practice the principles of recovery.
Yeah.
And then back to how you eat dinner, you have a meeting with one of the counselors, a group meeting, and then a 12-step meeting that night, and then lights out, start over, let's go.
I don't think somebody who's listening to this could duplicate what you're doing on the fly. It would take a long time to build. But talk about the variety you touched on a minute ago, the thrift store, the car lot. People are like, what? What car lot?
Right.
Talk about the variety of different ways that you fundraise.
Yeah. So when Buzzy took over in '84, he realized real quickly that the government wasn't giving any money out to alcoholic and addict males that were living on the street. So he started raising money. So the development team first started then. And he asked a lot of his peers for money. He was on a Sugar Bowl committee, a nice country club. He didn't really do all that. He let his daughter and his wife go to all those functions, but he knew a lot of people and he helped anyone. You're like, who's meeting with Buzzy? You're like, it could be a guy off the street. It could be an NFL player. We had Saints players living in Bridge House in the late 80s, which was wild. And then they would drive and go to work. But he realized he needed to expand the length of stay, kind of bring reality into the treatment center. And when he asked his peers for money, they gave him money, but they gave him tons of in-kind items like clothing, stoves, refrigerators. And it was that point that he started a thrift store to become a revenue stream, but, more importantly, a place where the individuals will experience some of those daily stressors and the reality therapy set in. And not long after that, he was in the car dealership business. So it wasn't long after that, we started asking for donations for the thrift store and then eventually asking the community for donations for our car lot. So those two, our thrift store brings in about 20 to 25% of our budget annually. And we have a $10 million budget.
Wow.
Yeah. We have 92 employees, about 18 at thrift store operation. It's a beast. So we do have a lot of overhead. But the car lot only has like 5 employees. And the development team only has 3, about 4, 5 administration, a maintenance crew and inside maintenance, outside maintenance, vans. And then the rest of the employees are all political counselors and resident advisors. And the car lot, it's crazy. I mean, before COVID started, we were getting close to 100 cars donated a month. Now, a lot of these we could not resell to the general public. We had to just send to scrap. But the way our program's set now with the cars is we take anything. Because even if we have to junk it, we'll make $400 or $450. We own our own tow truck. We have our own mechanic shop. We try to fix it if we can. If we feel like it's something we would let our siblings drive or our kids drive, then we sell it to the public. Sometimes we sell it to other car lots. Or people who own used car lots, they'll come buy a car for parts or a thing. So now we only get about 65, 70 cars donated a month, but that's a lot.
That is a lot.
It is. And then the thrift stores, we have 2 trucks that are out on the road every day picking up donations from people. But it took a long time. Like you said, people look at our motto and like, I'm going to do that. it took years for our thrift store to develop what it is today, and tons of tons of support from our community. We know we provide a vital service to the greater New Orleans area, but we really couldn't do what we do without their support. If you look at our funding pie chart, there's four areas. There's the store, car lot development, which is specialty grants, grant writing, direct ask. And then there's government support, which is the majority of that is Medicaid. So those other three, car lot, thrift store development, depend on donations. And so about 67%, I think it wasn't 24 of our funding is because of people's donation.
You must be worried about cuts to Medicaid, even though you get other revenue streams. Look at, well, there's an opinion coming. Look at the work that you put in just to help people get back on their feet and become tax-paying citizens who have some dignity
Yeah.
and a life.
Yeah. So with such a Medicaid, like for each person that comes through our program, in order to complete, we want them to be clean and sober for X amount of time, have a job, a source of income, and they usually stay with us for like a month or so. Once they've secured an outside job, it's like in phase 3. We want them to have a safe place to stay. And then we want them to have a strong network of people in recovery kind of outside of our walls. But the Medicaid is a big scare. Our rates for reimbursement, there's different levels of care. There's 6 different MCO insurance companies that write behavioral health and substance abuse. And I mean, like I said, we're long term. So the people who we do get funding for, which at any given point, it's like 50% of the people we treat, because after 90 days, you're not getting a nickel. So we're all dependent on those donations. We call them like community beds or scholarship beds. So at any given time, but 35% of your budget is, it's a lot of money. It's $3.5 million that we rely on the government for. At one point, we really didn't have much support. And then, when it became available, we entered it. Like Grace House was getting some government support because of the women, especially women who had children that were out of the poverty line. But we hadn't seen an increase in Louisiana in the reimbursement rate since 2012. So it got increased a little, like 20%. But for us, at the 3.1 level of care, which is after that 45-day period, they pay like $102 a day. It cost us about $115 a day per bed. So, and what's going to happen? A lot of work goes on. We're in a coalition with a couple of other facilities, and we were nervous we were going to lose that 20% because it was only put in place for 9 months. But they, knock on wood, God, they kept it in place for the next year, and it looks like it's going to stay there where it was just temporary. With that increase staying in place, the majority of the people, we're still losing money, or it still costs us.
Well, you used the term before. You also have special events fundraisers, and I cannot, after looking at your stuff, I cannot let you go without asking you about something called the Mr. Legs. I think you 24. That means you had 23 other ones. The Mr. Legs 24 fundraiser. That seems to be in a Mardi Gras, New Orleans tradition.
It's wild. So I tell people early off in recovery, you maybe shouldn't attend this event. But saying that, just that there is alcohol. I mean, in New Orleans, it's hard to have a fundraiser without food.
Yeah, right.
And for me, like step one was I needed to realize that I was powerless of alcohol and pills. But step 1A was for me to realize like a lot of my close friends that drank a lot and abused alcohol at points in their life that they were not, they were not alcohol. So realizing that other people can drink and some kids sometimes get drunk and, the next day they wake up and they have a hangover and they're like, I'm not doing this anymore, and they don't. Where, the addict alcoholics, like, I'm going to bite the dog that bit me. But anyway, Mr. Legs just had its 25th year. So we have contestants. It was started as a mock beauty pageant for men. And it has transitioned over the years to a hysterical performance by the contestants. They get on stage and they're usually taking on the role of a celebrity or somebody that's been in the news. We have some clever guys, like one of the guys, Steve Carnes, who's in it just about every year and usually wins best costume performance. Extremely intelligent, very witty. He's about 6'5", about 350, and has been everything from Snooki to Michael Jackson to Queen Elizabeth. And this year he was Pope Leo.
Oh, gee.
Done to come out. And by the end of it, they're showing their legs and maybe some of their chest, and it gets a little R-rated. But the craziest thing about it, so the winner of Mr. Legs is the individual who raises the most money for us. And then we give out we have like celebrity judges, like TV anchors that vote on like sexiest legs, best performance, best costume, hairiest leg, things like that. But the real winner is the person who raised the most money.
Awesome.
We have a guy that graduated, Roberto, from Bridgehouse in 1987. He couldn't be in it this year because he was sick, but he still raised $15,000.
Unbelievable.
So we have 3 graduates from our program, and then another guy who's in recovery that are always in the event. I'm like, I don't know how you'll do it, because these other guys are like, they get liquid courage before they go up on stage and dance in front of 1,000 people that you don't know. And it's crazy. We raised $130,000 this year at the event. It's wild.
Well, and the reason I brought it up,
Talking about is our 4th annual Soberfest. So we wanted to have a festival, alcohol, drug-free festival, music festival that, could not only bring our community together, but also show our residents that you can have fun. Not only is recovery attainable, it can be enjoyable. So, and then we have 2 other events that raise a lot of money also.
having fun without substances and giving people a leg up. That seems to describe you guys in a sentence or so.
It does. It sure does.
Kevin, I'm so glad you could talk about it today. There's so many people who listen across the country and outside of the country who are struggling to keep programs going. And I loved the creativity and the variety of things that you've done to help people who literally have lost everything. Those of you who listen know that we're going to put links to Bridge House, Grace House, the contact information on the podcast. Kevin, not only thanks for your work, but thanks for sharing your story. Pretty amazing. For those of you listening and watching, we hope you find support, help wherever you are. As always, thanks for listening. Be safe. And you know what? Think about helping somebody else in need. Be a buzzy.